Today's sponsor of the Vision Quest podcast is 920 Hat Company. Leather patch hats are in, and 920 Hat Company is here to hook you up with your very own custom hat. All patches are lasered on top-grade genuine leather and on popular brand hats like Richardson and FlexFit. Whether you're looking to show off your business or want a one-of-a-kind hat for yourself, 920 Hat Company can do it all. All the hats are handcrafted right in the Fox Valley, but worn across America. With over 500 hats in stock, they guarantee fast turnaround times. Honestly, Liam, looking at these hats, solid, right?
Yeah, they're pretty. I like them.
I like that patch itself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one-of-a-kind stuff. I know his name's Trevor. He does great work. He's actually gotten I think we got a knit hat coming.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we got that coming. So we're really excited to have these guys on board as a sponsor. So get down to check them out on Facebook. I believe they're on Instagram. Check them out, man. They got the best hats, I think, in the Fox Valley, if not in the state.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So get down to 920 Hat Company on social media and check them out. We have Coach Millard with us. This is our first go around here. I don't think it's going on YouTube right now. It just told me that it's not live. I don't care. It's fine. It's on Facebook. So if everybody's on Facebook land, we're here with Coach Ernie Millard, the Homestead head wrestling coach, and Charlie's dad. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm going to pick on you for 1 second, Brad. You spelled my name wrong.
I did? No, you did that. You did
I
that.
did that?
You typed that in, sir.
All
you
right.
can change it.
I don't know how to
change
do that.
It's up there.
That makes sense at my age in retirement that I can't even spell my own name right anymore.
Oh, it's all good. So there will be.
It's funny you say that. After being in the town I've been in as long as I have, my wife, when she's with me, it's always like, "Oh, this is Ernie and Ernie's wife," and we've gotten to the point in the world now where it's like, "Oh, you're Charlie's dad." He says that's poetic justice after 34 years of teaching in the same school district. So
that's awesome.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you here. And I know that there was supposed to be a match and things like that, but I wanted to bring you on anyways because you're having kind of a special year this year, right? Like it's something that's been talked about, I'm sure, in your household for a minute. You got to kind of figure those things out, but you're gonna be kind of on a end of a trip, right?
Yeah, for sure. We have 3 kids, and Charlie's our youngest.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot. We're going to be empty nesters. In a year or two.
Oh boy.
And certainly I've gotten to live the last 3 years, honestly, of Charlie's high school career. Kind of, I think a dream that every dad who coaches or every parent who coaches wishes for, right? Like, I got to sit on the side of the mat when my son won a state championship last year. And, I talked to friends of mine who, I'm kind of the old guy in the coaching circles now. And my friends who have young kids, they talk about all the time. They're like, man, I hope I get that same opportunity someday. And also appreciating that it doesn't happen all the time.
Right. Correct. And that's, so to me, with what you're going through and what you've been through, I mean, we're going to get into that more, but it seems like a lot of what you have built, I mean, because you're, again, we're going to talk about it too, is you weren't just in wrestling, but you've kind of built this history, like a legacy. I mean, for lack of a better term, but what are your thoughts on where you started in sports? Like, where did you get started?
So I'm a Pacific Northwest kid, born and raised out in the state of Oregon.
Nice. Okay.
In Washington. I was born in 64, so I'm the last of the baby boomers. And I'm a history teacher, so that's the kind of stuff we pay attention to.
Right.
I grew up in really, really small towns until I was about 12 or 13 years old.
Okay.
And people will say small towns, but I lived in Willard, Washington, up in the Cascade Mountains that had 33 people in it.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
My dad worked for the Forest Service. He was, a GS3, as they call it. They have government service ratings. He was working in a big national forest, the Siuslaw National Forest. And
okay.
And so until I was about 4, we lived in a town where we couldn't get a radio station. If the weather was good, you could get 3 TV stations back then before the public broadcasting system came on. I'm so old that I remember when Sesame Street started, right?
Yeah.
Like Ernie and Bert show up in 1969 on Sesame Street. But we were in a town where, looking back on it, we didn't have much. We had to figure out stuff to do, right? And I grew up, I loved to fish, grew up loving to fish and being outside all the time. Then we moved to the Willamette Valley in Oregon, really outside of Corvallis.
Okay.
And then when I was 12, we moved to a suburb of Portland. So my upbringing was small towns, always loved sports.
Yeah.
My dad's from Pennsylvania, so he loved wrestling. And when we talk about high school wrestling, it's Pennsylvania, honestly, and every other state. When we look at not just the success, but the numbers of kids who are doing it, right? This blue collar. So he wanted to introduce me to wrestling. I grew up loving baseball. I played baseball my whole life. I played soccer as I got older. I ran cross country my senior year. And frankly, I wasn't great at any of them.
Yeah.
I was really little. I matured late. I was 5'4" when I graduated from high school.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
And weighed 130 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was really tiny, but I always loved sports.
Yep.
And, when I was a kid, baseball was the one sport you could get on TV on Saturdays. My dad and I would watch it. We didn't have an NFL team in Oregon.
Yep.
The Seahawks came up in Seattle later.
Correct.
So I remember the first football game I ever watched was the Miami Dolphins and Kansas City Chiefs in that epic playoff game, I think in 71. And from that day on, I was a Miami Dolphins fan until I moved to Wisconsin, right?
Oh, cow.
But yeah, I just grew up loving sports. My sister and I would play wiffle ball. We'd in the yard, we'd go play with our buddies. And so I had an appreciation for a lot of sports. I didn't really specialize in anything. I started to specialize in wrestling a little bit, spending more time in it. Didn't have the same kind of opportunities that our kids have today.
Oh my God.
To be good, but grew up always loving sports and have always kind of been fanatical about them. Moved out here to Wisconsin in December of 85. My family had moved out, my mom and dad and my brother. My sister was at Vanderbilt University at the time. My brother Ethan's 12 years younger than me. At the time, I didn't get along great with my dad. But I came out here because I missed Ethan.
Okay.
Because he was in the 4th grade at the time.
Yeah.
My dad wasn't really excited about me going into education. I wanted to be a teacher. At the time I was working, and I remember I called him and said, I really want to come out to Wisconsin. Would love it if I could live with you guys while I go to school to save some money. But the only deal is I want to be a teacher. That's what I want to be. I want to be an educator. I knew it. I loved working with kids. I said, if that's okay with you, I'm going to come out. And he Federal Expressed me an application to UWM, which back then, Federal Express wasn't as common as it is now. And that was his way of saying, yeah, we want you to come back.
Right.
And so I came out, and I had out of high school, I graduated in 82. I'd gone to Boston University and walked on the wrestling team there. Yep. I was super, super immature as a student and probably wasn't ready to handle the rigors of that. I didn't turn 18 until late September of my freshman year in college. So I was it was one of the most important things that ever happened in my life because I met Carl Adams, who was a 2-time NCAA champ from Iowa State. He was my coach.
Nice. Okay.
I went from a town in Oregon, Tigard, Oregon, that was not a diverse population at all, to living in the city of Boston in the early 80s. And Carl was, it's funny, I saw Carl at the NCAA championships when we were down in Tulsa this spring, and got to chat with him. And he's really good friends with Mr. Carr, Nate Carr's dad. And we chatted, and Carl was the first black male I ever knew. And,
well, you were from some of the northern areas, so it just was not the areas they were going to.
It's a, while school wasn't a success for me, and I ended up leaving, dropping out after a year and a half. And my time with him, I said to him, you helped make me the man I am, and help me understand things. One of the things about growing up in Oregon was I didn't really have the opportunity to form any stereotypes in my mind about anything. And so Carl, really, we had a really diverse team, 5 black guys, 5 white guys, in a city that was really racially divided and ethnically divided. And so I learned some incredible life lessons about people.
So not strange at that time, but with the things that you went through, like you were talking about your dad before with sports and how, he came from PA and wrestling was big. When you started getting into sports, we talk about this a lot with a lot of the guys that we have on here because it's important. I mean, so what kind of coaching or what kind of support unit did you have like you said, you didn't have the opportunities that you did, obviously that the kids have now. What was it? Was your dad coaching you through a lot of stuff? Was that
my dad,
something?
Interesting enough, my dad never coached me. He didn't wrestle at all. He'd help out with baseball a little bit here and there. He didn't coach me. My first wrestling experience was in Shed, this little town called Shed, Oregon, right? And the guy down the road, one of my buddies, Marty Benedict, his dad was the head wrestling coach at Central Lynn High School. And he just came and picked me up one day and said, we're going to YMCA wrestling practice, right? And it was a couple times a week. And I was like, okay, I'm a wrestler now, right? And we went, and I think I went to practice for 2 weeks, and then I wrestled my first match and I won. And my grandfather, who Charlie's named after, who I was really close with, was in town. And I came back and I'm like, this is easy, Grandpa. I said to him, I think I was like 6 or 7. And the next week we went, and this kid just beat me into the ground, right? And my grandpa was there, and he was like, not so easy as you thought, is it? Right? So my dad, that was interesting because most people you're going to hear their dads were really involved. My mom and dad were really supportive. They were at everything.
Sure.
They didn't miss much stuff.
But they left well enough alone.
He did for the most part. My dad could be a little bit over the top sometimes. He wanted me to win. And I was definitely an above average wrestler in high school, but I wasn't a great wrestler by any means. And a bunch of family members came in to watch us wrestle a team that was defending state champ, and I had a state runner up in that match, in that meet. And it was really close for a while, and he launched me, threw me to my back, and I eventually fought off. And I think the final score was like 13-8 or something. Giving up a 5-point move, and he was pissed at me. In part, sometimes we live vicariously through our kid, and the rest of the family wasn't too pleased with him with that reaction. All dads have that every once in a while,
of course.
But as I got older, that support never ended. I was the head baseball coach at Homestead for 26 years, and I coached like 860 games or 850 games or something like that. Wow. And I think my dad was at 800 of them.
Nice. Well, right? Okay. That makes sense. It makes sense.
Always there. Just always there.
Yep.
My dad is really struggling with Alzheimer's the last 2 years. And it's an incredibly painful and awful disease. But when he was starting to struggle with it, Charlie was a sophomore. And I wanted Dad to be around, right? I wanted to take him to stuff. And it was funny. The school district said, well, that's fine, but we have to do a background check on your dad if he's going to ride in the van with the team, right? Because we're at this point where we're driving. So the school district does a background check on my dad, and I had to have him made as a volunteer assistant coach in order to travel with the team. Right?
Insurance, I get it.
And so we drive up to Neenah, and he would, he'd tag along with me and sit in the chair when the kids were wrestling.
That's
and
awesome.
Loved it. And the coaching community is really tight knit, right?
Yeah.
There's times where you're irritated with the guy across them, but really tight knit. And I remember we were at the Slinger tournament. That was the first tournament of the year. And he came with me. My wife brought him so he could be with us.
Yeah.
And you have your coach's lunch, right? Yep. I'm like, Dad, you're on the staff. You get to come have lunch with us.
Nice.
And so a bunch of my buddies are sitting there, and I'd given them a heads up. Hey, he's struggling a little bit. And so he starts telling them stories about his wrestling career, right? And he never wrestled in his life. Never stepped on the mat.
That's awesome.
And I was like, oh boy. But it was such a wonderful thing for him to be around great people. Yeah. And my buddies, they loved it. Like then every time we'd go to a tournament, they would try and feed into that more, right? And Dad was having a great time. So yeah, my parents
matters. That's the biggest thing.
Crazy supportive. They were both there the last 2 years when Charlie was wrestling for a state title in Madison. Yeah. My sister came in from Pennsylvania. My brother lives in town. He was there. Maggie was living out in Corvallis at the time, his sister, and she flew in. Both, it's just been.
You have a great family. We have a great
family. I have a great family. And Charlie has a support network that very few kids are fortunate enough to have, right?
That's great. That's good.
You talk about the journey we're on, and we're at the point where that journey for Lisa and I and this part of the family support network is going to kind of end pretty soon.
Sure.
Where we're going to have to hand him off. And Lisa and I were talking about it Saturday. I'm giving my wife a shout out. It's her 20th wedding anniversary today. She's letting me be on a podcast tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But we went up to Door County for the weekend.
That's cool.
And we're talking about it Saturday. And she was talking about, well, Charlie's going to be at Minnesota pretty soon. And a couple tears, started to flow. And she and Charlie are crazy tight. It's a really special relationship for me as a dad to watch. But we're really fortunate. Both sets of grandparents have lived in the community and gotten to see them.
Yeah,
we're financially in a place where we could afford to send him to Askren Wrestling Academy.
Yeah,
and Charlie's story, I love his story because he's been there for 12 years now, but he didn't walk into the sport being good at it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
We were able, as he was getting older, to hire a nutritionist, take the hat off and show the bald head for a while. I don't hope the reflection's not too bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
When, part of wrestling is weight management, right?
Yeah.
And he was struggling a little bit with it, leading into, his freshman year at the end of the year. He qualified for the state championships, right? And his weight, it was a struggle at times with him. And as much as I wanted to help, I just didn't have the answers. And so a good friend of mine, who was a college athlete and a nutritionist, Trevor Kim, was kind of breaking ground in that area. And so we hired him. We were fortunate enough to be able to afford it. And it made a gigantic difference in Charlie's life. So he got that support network. He's got, we were able during COVID to purchase a weight set for him, right? Where he couldn't get anywhere and where weights were going from $1 a pound to $3 a pound, but we were able to do that for him.
That's cool.
And, he's just, I always tell kids in my classroom or on my team or in our house, I never want you to feel guilty for the good things you have. I want you to appreciate them though, and understand that sometimes other people don't get to do that.
Right.
We are fortunate. My wife's father is partners with Ted Kellner, who's one of the top donors at the University of Wisconsin. And Ted has a suite at the Kohl Center. And so we we get to buy tickets to sit in Ted's box at the Kohl Center, which is the best seat in the house, right?
That's awesome.
And my buddies are always yapping at me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I have to pay more for my ticket than you do. And they're yelling at me and going, yeah, please, we'll trade you anytime. But, just being able to put all my family and friends and my other wrestlers, parents and stuff in a place where they can enjoy that camaraderie.
Yeah.
Where, it's not a little thing when you put everything else together.
Correct. And Kakana's we have a box that's up there too. And it does kind of, and you think about it too, because these kids they're at a tournament and it's crazy. And a lot of times you only have, you have the spots to sit down and you're not really removed from the craziness. I know the athletes and the coaches have the areas down, down below where the spectators can't go, things like that. But you can at least go up to a nonchalant area, and hang out with the families that are up there, the other wrestlers. And so it's definitely a benefit. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, he's gotten a lot of support.
Yeah.
That's allowed him to be successful. Right.
Good.
Looking back when Charlie started, as a little kid, Lisa and I really exposed him to almost everything.
Sure.
When he was little, he loved being outside, and he's right-handed, but he swings a golf club and a baseball bat left-handed. And
Liam is the same way with certain things, correct? Yeah.
And interestingly, when kids are little, kids are right-eye dominant.
Yep.
And so they naturally are going to turn to when a ball is in front of them. They're going to turn so that they would be swinging left-handed.
Yep.
And I'd been around sports enough, right? Well, I'm the head baseball coach at Homestead. I'm like, if I get a left-handed hitter here, and so he'd just go around the yard with his little golf club or his little bat and
awesome.
Hit. But we exposed him to tennis and swimming, and wrestling and baseball. And it was interesting. The one that he was worse at was wrestling. But that was the one that he fell in love with.
Here you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And we started with the ninjas course out in Arrowhead.
Yep.
At the time, John Messenbrink was running it. And like I said, Lisa and John went to college together and we knew him. And so I took him out and Charlie loved it with John.
Yeah.
And then Max opened his academy up about 4 months in. So we finished ninjas with John and came to Mequon because I preferred to drive 10 minutes over 50 minutes. And
why would you?
And Max actually wasn't running the ninjas class at the beginning.
Yeah.
And Charlie didn't love it. And I'm like, I just want you to give it a try. Max is going to take over here a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a relationship now that, I say this all the time. After his relationship with his immediate family, the most important person in Charlie's life is Max.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really, I can be so happy about that for so many reasons. Not
a great dude.
I mean, we look back and he's had a lot of success. He's going to college to wrestle. He's getting opportunities at but
Big Ten.
But Max,
is wrestling.
I still shake my head sometimes when I watch that. And my kid's going to be a Big Ten wrestler, right? Like, wow.
Yeah. Whoa.
And talking about what I'm talking about, I think about all the time because Lisa gets irritated with me, but he was kind of a chunky little guy, right? Had high energy. He was like me, couldn't maintain his focus on anything for more than about 10 seconds. And there were days where he was the only ninja in that class with Max when he first opened the academy. And
no kidding.
And the academy started to grow.
Yeah.
And Charlie was the worst wrestler in that room of like 40 kids for a while.
Sure.
And if Max came on, he would say it too. There's a multitude of reasons, right? Like he was
sounds like Ben Askren.
Yeah. Ben talks about it all the time, right? I saw a couple of Ben's report cards when he was little that he kept. And I'm not kidding you. The teacher was like, has a hard time holding still, lacks motor function. 4-time NCAA finalist, right? 2-time Hodge Trophy winner, lacking motor function and skills. And I'm like, well, I'm glad he hung on to that.
Yeah, right.
Chuck's a good friend of mine, and he keeps all this stuff, and so he would bring it out and show it to me. And
that's funny. That's funny.
But for Lisa and I, and looking back on it, if I could script it how I wanted, this is how it would be, right?
Okay.
Him having those struggles when he was young, because he learned he learned to like the sport for what it was,
right?
Going to practice and being with Max.
That makes sense.
Because we didn't go to a lot of tournaments. I think he wrestled 15 to 20 matches those first 2 years he started competing. He trained for 2 years, then we started competing. And remember, we went to the West Bend tournament, the West Bend Wildcats tournament. And he won the first match he ever wrestled, got a takedown, turked the kid, put him on his back. And I'm like, Dad's like, yeah, this is awesome. And then he did not win a match for 2 years after that. Not 2 weeks, not 2 months, 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
The second kid that he wrestled that day, you may have heard of him. His name is Connor Mirasola.
Never heard of him. I don't know who that.
And that was Connor's first tournament too.
Oh, no kidding.
Believe it or not.
That's awesome. That's a cool story.
That's on Wildcats tournament. And I remember one of my best friends who was actually a wrestler for me. And now is, years later, decades later, is one of my best friends. He was being really supportive, and he came to a tournament with Lisa and I. We were sitting in the stands, and things were not going well for Charlie, as he would shoot and then the kid would sprawl and get the takedown. And Danny looked at me and he goes, I don't know, Ernie. He goes, maybe debate or forensics is the place for Charlie to go. And Danny loves Charlie so much that he flew out after his freshman year to Fargo. He wanted to go to Fargo. With us. So he flew out to go to Fargo with us.
Yep.
And actually he drove out there with me. What am I saying? He ended up flying home, but he was sitting next to me when Charlie beat Angelo Ferrari in the round of 16 after his freshman year. And, that was one of those matches where you're in the Fargo Dome and there's 5,000 or 6,000 people packed in there. Yep. And you're in, that was the fourth round of the night at the time. And, everybody, they know who Angelo Ferrari is, right?
Right.
Everybody does. The Ferrari family's a great family of wrestling. They really like being in the spotlight. And when you have the success that they've had and you like being in it, you're going to get that.
Yep.
It's funny. I watched Angelo's interview with Caden Henschel after Who's Number One. And he did a great interview. And sometimes we don't like people because they're flamboyant and I found myself going, I like this kid.
Right.
Like, he's a competitor, and maybe I don't like the showmanship a little bit at the end of matches, but I listened to him and I'm like, I got done and I was like, I like this kid. Yeah. I think he's going to be really, really, he already is.
They're feeding into the environment, they're just the feeling of winning, and probably people don't like you and so you feed into that, and there's excitement in it. And I think it helps wrestling.
But, so Charlie's down 2-0 at the end of the first period. And then he got a tilt and it's 2-2 and he's winning on criteria. And all of a sudden, every person in the Fargo Dome is now paying attention to mat number 21, right? Like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
And Charlie ended up winning 6-2, got 2 takedowns. And it kind of put him on the mat. And anyway, Danny was sitting next to me and I'm jumping up and down like Steve Martin in Parenthood after his kid gets that game-winning hit. I'm like out of control up in the stands, like losing my mind. I calm down and I sit down and Danny goes, it's a good thing you didn't decide to send him into forensics and debate, Ernie.
Yeah, maybe. Before we get too far, we gotta talk. We gotta get back onto you too here.
So to your point, my life is really, it's really changed a lot since Charlie began to elevate what he was doing. Yeah. I started. I went to UWM. If you want to backtrack, I saw that. I started there in December of '86 or January of '86, and to put things in perspective, I had $750 I brought with me from Oregon.
Holy cow!
And I signed up for 18 credits at UWM, and that cost me $695 in January of 1986. Like now, it's like $695 a credit.
Yeah, just for a page out of a book.
At lots of places, right? And and worked my way through school and ended up at Homestead Student Teaching. kind of by happenstance, I was scheduled to be student teaching in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And I waited on a table at a restaurant in Mequon on the principal and his wife. And John Box, who ended up being our superintendent, and who I'm still really close with, and his wife, Gail, liked me. And she made him call UWM the next morning. I waited on him on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And he called UWM, and I ended up student teaching at UWM.
Oh, man.
And then as I was student teaching, I got offered a job as an assistant softball coach at Homestead for Dave Keel.
Okay.
Dave Keel is, one of the most legendary coaches in the history of the state.
Yeah.
6 state championships as a football coach.
Yep.
He's the only coach that I know of, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, that's in the Hall of Fame in both football and softball in the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
So he hired me, and I ended up getting the JV job for baseball that summer.
Yeah.
Got a part-time job at Homestead after that. I've never left Homestead since spring of 1989.
You mentioned Boston College, though.
Boston U.
Okay.
So I was a Terrier.
Okay. Yep. Those are me.
I was out there in fall of '82.
Okay. And then
I wrestled there for Carl.
Yep.
I remember I was an above average wrestler in high school, and that was it. I never even made it to the state tournament.
Same here.
But for some reason, I picked up the paper one day, the school paper, and it said, "We're looking for wrestlers at Boston University."
Yeah.
And Coach Adams' phone number was in there, and I called him, and I said, tell me what college wrestling's about. And he said, well, you got to come in and talk to me. And so I went into his office.
Yeah.
And here I am, a 17-year-old kid. I'm 3,000 miles from home. And I could just tell what kind of a person was. He was looking at me, and he's like, what weight class are you? And they had a 3-time conference champ who had just graduated back then.
Okay.
And I think we were the Eastern Athletic Conference at the time. And at the time, the conference champions had an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament at the time.
Okay.
Carl was a great wrestler. He was teammates with Dan Gable. He was a little younger than Dan Gable, but he was teammates with Dan Gable, and was, just outstanding. And he had gone from the University of Connecticut to Boston University the year before, and brought some couple guys with him, Mike Enzian and Todd Giles, who were team captains of mine when I was there.
Okay.
And I'm like, I'm going to go out for wrestling, not having a clue. Right. And, and it was crazy experience, not understanding what you're getting into. And then you're there, and
right.
And I think I was 0-7. And then I lost a match. And I was kind of beside myself. I wasn't good. I felt like I was letting the team down. I made the varsity. I beat there were a bunch of us that wanted to be the varsity 118 pounder. Right.
Yeah.
And the one thing I was that kid that, as Carl said, I didn't quit. I just didn't quit.
Yeah.
I wasn't very skilled. I was terrible on my feet.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty good at getting away, and I was really tough on top. I was a leg rider.
Yeah. Nice.
So if you got underneath me, I could be really competitive.
Yeah.
And even at the collegiate level, I was okay at getting away. I just so bad on my feet. Like
sure.
My junior year in high school, I think I was 13-0 at one point in time, and I'd gotten taken down to start matches 12 times. My coach was just like, oh my God. But I just didn't quit. And we were at a tournament at the Coast Guard Academy.
Yeah.
And, this was before Tech Falls too. They didn't even have Tech Falls back then.
Really?
This guy was just pasting me. It was like 12-0 or something like that. And I was so bad that he was disgusted with me. And he like jacked me off the side of the mat. And I bring it up because it was when everything changed. Like, I got up and I was mad. Like this guy's insulting me. And I ended up losing 14-13 in that match. And
not bad.
I walked off the match, and Carl looked at me and he said, welcome to the team.
What?
Like, he saw the light switch went on, right?
Yeah.
And I finished up. So I think I was at the time, maybe I was 1-8 or 1-9, and I ended up 10-12 that year.
Oh wow!
And lost in the it was the New England Conference. That's what it was in wrestling. Lost in the New England Conference Championships to a guy who'd beaten me 16-0, 8-5. And I was actually down 6-5 and gave up a takedown. Was trying to get a takedown late.
Okay.
And lost. So I came one takedown away from being at the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely have been the number 32 seed. Make no mistake about it in that tournament. They didn't have 33 then either. Now they have 33 guys. In
Yeah.
32. But
that's crazy.
But it was such a great experience for me traveling with those guys. Todd Giles was one of my best friends on the team, and
you're 17 years old out there, and you're in athletics and things like that. But like, what are you doing, especially in that time? What are you guys doing for free time? Like, what do you guys?
So I was actually in Naval ROTC out there too. So I had wrestling, Naval ROTC, in school, and was doing, was learning life lessons as a guy who was really, really immature.
Yeah.
And so there was no free time. There was zero. Okay. But that was okay, because when you're in a room with those guys, I mean, all my free time was spent with them, right?
Okay.
And I loved them, and they loved me. And in the wrestling room, love meant sometimes you're screaming at each other and throwing tantrums but then you get, you make weight and you get in the, you go get something to eat, or you get in the van and you go somewhere. And I remember all those guys really, really well. And that was, like I said, I left there in December of '83. 13 years later, I was out in Boston visiting a cousin of mine. I'm going to go to Boston University and tour the campus. And I walked into the athletic center, and Coach Adams was in his office. And I walked in, and he looked up at me after 13 years and said, "Ernie," and gave me a huge hug.
That's awesome. That's very cool. That's very cool.
And it's funny, I remembered not being very good and feeling like I let the team down, and I left. And all he remembered was I was this kid who got better and did what I could to help the team. And
you guys had that team family environment. I mean,
my God, it was,
you guys
we were
grew on
so
each
tight.
other. You're growing up with each other. You guys are going through a lot, So,
but
were you the only one?
Conference championship that year? Really? It was, I think, our second or third year in a row. And I scored a lot of points for the team. And I remember I was getting ready for the semifinals against a kid that I had lost to earlier in the year. Yeah. And Carl was getting me ready, and I wasn't even supposed to be in the semifinals. And I'm like, I remember I'm like, "Coach, I'm going to pin this guy. I'm going to stick this guy." And Carl was like, let's just stay the course and get a takedown here. Right.
He's a smart man.
I did. I pinned the guy.
Nice.
To the finals.
Nice. Very good.
And he just grinned at me. And he's such a great person. And, he's the inventor of the Atom takedown machine, the one that they had on the wall.
Yes. Really?
Yeah, that's my coach. And he was one of the first coaches to come out with videos back when it was video cassettes.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was kind of a revolutionary.
Wow.
And he always told us he would dream of stuff at night, and he kept a notepad next to his bed, and he would wake up and write stuff down, and his wife would get mad at him for having the light on while he's writing, because he said, "If I wait till tomorrow morning, I'm going to forget it." So the Atom takedown machine he dreamt of and then made it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I see one of those things back, like, you don't see them much anymore, but when you see them in a wrestling room, you're like, man, this room's been through some stuff. Like, holy cow, it's been around. So when you're going through that with that coach though too, were you picking up on coaching as you were going through that process? Because I mean, looking at the history that you have coaching now, were you showing interest in that even as an athlete? Yeah,
I think so. Like I said, I was really little. I wasn't a good baseball player at all, but I loved being around baseball. And I think my sitting, thank God they came up with aluminum benches, or I'd still have splinters in my hinder, I think. But, I was a guy, like, I wanted something to do. And people who know me well realize I'm a little bit hyperactive and I need stuff to do, right, to channel my enthusiasm. So I'd keep the book, and I would, I'd go out and take ground balls with guys, or I'd be the guy running out to throw to the right field. And so I absolutely think that side of it, getting, looking back and introspect, getting the opportunity to observe a lot, was important for me. I always liked, like, even when I'd gotten out of high school and I'd stopped going to BU and I was looking for something to do, I always liked working with kids.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very old. I think I was 19 at the time. And my high school coach had retired, but his assistant, they needed a youth or elementary school coach.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he said, Ernie, I want you to give this a shot. This will be good for you. Nice. And so I did. I went and coached elementary school wrestling. And then I started coaching youth baseball, back in Oregon. We were in the Little League program.
Okay. So you're doing it already back there.
Yeah. I was 19 and I was coaching Little League baseball.
Okay.
And it was just something I really enjoyed, being around kids and working on getting better. And
yeah,
I was always focused on doing one thing at a time with kids, breaking things down. And
sure,
I think I was 20 and we were getting beat in a baseball game, and kid hit one way out, and one of my kids hit the cutoff and threw it to third and held the kid to a double. And I'm losing my mind with excitement. And people are like, what are you doing? The kid just got a double. And I'm like, well, you don't understand. We kept him, from moving up on the base. So I always liked that aspect of it. And
okay. Yep.
And so, yeah, it was pretty evident, even before I came back to Wisconsin and UWM, that was where my interest lied. And when I was at UWM, I called around in Mequon and said, is anybody looking for an assistant coach on a baseball team? Yeah. And, communities are always looking for coaches. They don't have enough coaches. Right. And so I ended up coaching 13-year-old not Legion, but that age
travel ball, whatever. Yeah.
Before I started coaching at Homestead.
Okay. So when you made your move from Boston over to, obviously you go back to Boston. Was Boston a place that you felt like you were gonna stay when you were there? Obviously, because you said you wanted to go to Wisconsin, but
so I was living in Oregon, went to BU, went back to Oregon. My family moved here.
Oh man!
When I moved here, I left a girlfriend, in Oregon. I missed her. Like I was bound and determined I was going back to Oregon when I got done. I wanted to become my brother and spend some time with him. And then that, we've all been there in relationships, right? Then 3 months later, 2 weeks later, she'd forgotten me.
Yeah.
Right. 3 months later, I'm recovering. And then
how dare she?
Yeah. If only she knew what she was missing out on, right?
Right.
She'd be exactly where she is right now, I'm sure.
That's awesome.
But, then I started to meet people and get involved with stuff. And, by the time I finished student teaching, I realized I was going to have an opportunity to be at Homestead and have a job, right? Where you're actually making enough money to get an apartment and get out on your own a little bit. And then, not many people can say that they spent their entire career at the same place.
Correct. I know I can.
And I have been, and I had great people around me, great leadership in the school, great coaches to learn from, and Dave and John Jacoris, who's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, who they were just amazing. I was way too young to be a head coach when I was, I was the head wrestling coach in '89 at the age of 24. And didn't know my head from my hinder, to be honest, and kind of winged it in terms of trying to teach the sport. The one thing I've always been good at is relationship building with kids.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And so you can have a lot of faults if kids know you care about them.
Yep.
And so that side of things I was good at from day one. I wasn't as mature as I needed to be, and you grow and and we didn't probably. I'm thinking back, right? Because I was emotional, and if they would have had me filmed arguing with officials or something at that time, like they have with social media, I don't know that my career would have gone the same way as it has. I learned and grew, and
of course,
it's something as I've seen what that can do. I'm pretty careful with that, what I'm going to say. But I was too young to be a head coach, but Phil Perling, my athletic director, I think saw some things in me that were going to, that he saw for the long term. And, And it ended up working out. Obviously, getting to stay where I got to stay. And
so we followed you to Milwaukee. You you got that job. So and you got into Homestead. So let's get into your homestead life here. So you haven't left. You've been there. What did you started coaching baseball there, correct?
I did. I was student teaching social studies. Started coaching actually softball that spring, and then baseball was a summer sport back then. And so I was able to coach baseball that summer, and they had a part-time opening in the high school. And I took the job. I wanted a job, right? And so I accepted it in the social studies department. The next year, Steve Pinkowski, who was the econ teacher, retired. You know, and this is a time where I remember Steve Pinkowski was a great teacher, but this was a time where after school would end, he would sit in his room and smoke his pipe and grade papers.
Hey, I still remember smoking days in the teacher's lounge.
Yeah.
I remember those.
We had a smoking lounge that nobody, you know, I've never smoked, so I wouldn't go in there, but the smoke would come billowing out. And but Steve Pinkowski would smoke his pipe in his classroom while he was grading papers every day. And he retired, and I got the opportunity to apply and got that position and never left. You know, I student taught in a classroom that I then taught in for 32 years. I was out of that room for 2 years. Jim Coots, who I student taught under, retired a couple of years later. And then, I mean, it was a special place for me to be. And I, you know, serving under the principles I did. And, you know, I was there so long. My superintendent in the Mequon-Thiensville School District, Matt Joint, was an elementary school teacher, and I hired him for his first job at Homestead to be on my baseball staff. And then he was my boss for the last 7 years, right?
It's classic. I was gonna say that's some pretty cool stuff right there. It comes back around, right? You kind of is that one of those things where you're like, hey, remember?
You know, I'm not that guy, but Matt, he's a special friend and a special guy in terms of his vision for caring about kids in the district. And he came from a family of superintendents, so it was evident he was moving in that direction. And I honestly had forgotten about it. And he reminded me a couple of years ago, you know, the reason I'm here, or I got this opportunity to be here, is because you gave me that chance to coach baseball with you. And
that's awesome.
And so, I ended up in the same place. I was the JV baseball coach for 4 years, and then Phil retired, and I got the opportunity to coach in 1993. And the interesting thing about that is my brother Ethan was a junior the year that I became head coach at Homestead.
Oh, wow.
we had a good year. We lost in the sectional semifinals to West Bend East, who ended up winning the state title that year.
Okay.
And then Ethan's senior year, we won the state championship with him as my number one pitcher. And I mean, you know, getting to live dreams in the state quarterfinals against West Allis Central, he hit the only home run of his life.
Such a unique opportunity that these things that you've run into, you just don't hear this stuff. Like this is Monty Beals making the comment here that you're a great storyteller, and he's not lying, because there's so many things and instances that you've brought up now that are just like, holy shit, this doesn't happen to anyone like this. Just running into the job, and then your brother and things like that. It's fantastic.
I try and I don't believe in divine intervention so much on stuff. Like I always say, I think back to the movie Gandhi, and he's talking to a minister and says, man, that was really lucky. And the minister goes, what do you mean that was lucky? And they start talking about God, and he goes, I just don't believe that my everyday experiences are so important that God's paying attention to what I'm doing on a daily basis. Right. Like, I do believe in karma. Like if you treat people well, you know, hopefully you get some breaks here and there. And I think, my mantra in my classroom was, you know, kids would come in every trimester and people are handing out their syllabus with 400 rules on it. And I'm like, first of all, I can't pay attention to something that long. So how am I going to ask one of my kids? And so I had one rule up on my whiteboard. First it was a chalkboard, then it became a whiteboard, and it was treat others well. 3 words.
Correct.
Like treat others well means we're not not going to cheat. We're not going to be disrespectful to other kids in our room, right? We're going to build relationships. Even if you don't love your classmates, at least know them.
Right.
So that if you see them in the hallway, you can acknowledge them. Or if you see some kid sitting in his classroom or sitting in the lunchroom, or she's sitting in the lunchroom alone, that can be a traumatic time for a kid, right?
Totally.
Going into that cafeteria, you don't know anybody, you're a new student. Like, okay, let's take a step. So I've gotten some breaks, and in so many ways. But I have tried. I've tried to be a good person, right?
Sure.
And there's times where you don't want to be. There's times where I don't want to be. Where I want to be vindictive.
Those moments.
I want to be vindictive and angry and and righteous. And in my mind, I'm righteous. And I do run hot and cold. Like my buddies used to call me the furnace. They're like, uh-oh, the furnace just got stoked. The furnace is on fire. Everybody stand back. Because I could go from 0 to 150 in about 2 seconds. And all rationality is now out the window. Like,
I know exactly. I'll tell you right now, from where I'm at right now, especially with with Liam and things like that, and trying to keeping composure sometimes, especially in the heat, especially as a coach. And like you said, just kind of grew as you got into coaching and you grew into coaching, you had those moments where you're just like, well, thank God social media wasn't around. But at the same time, though, too, you learned that, from those instances where you're like, I don't need to be doing that. I don't need to,
I want my buddies bring this up all the time because one of them was there when it happened. We had a dual meet and we had a referee who was really struggling. And he was struggling and he was arrogant, right? And he was doing a terrible job in the JV matches. And afterwards, I remember I walked up to him and it started out really calm. And I said, hey, can I talk to him for a minute? Sure. And I said, I want to talk about a couple of situations out there that I thought you could have handled a little bit differently in scoring. Sure. And he just turned on me and he said, are you questioning my judgment? And I went from 0 to 100 in 1 second. And I was like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am questioning your judgment. And he's like, get out of the gym. And I looked at him and I said, no, you get the hell out of my gym. Right. Handling it really, really maturely. Right.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And, the varsity official had gotten there. And fortunately, he was in agreement with me in terms of what was going on. Yeah. And the guy laughed, and he was mad. And the varsity official said to me, I did not see any of that conversation take place. Like, and I went back in, but then I got home and I'm also that guy that if I do something and I knew I was wrong for getting out of control, I'll fixate on it. Right. Like I'll lose sleep over it. And I try and learn lessons from that. And I'm like, I can't do that anymore. Like that's not good for my kids. That's not good for me. That's not setting a very good example. And, and I've really calmed down a lot. I still get fired up and excited. I'm a high energy coach. Yep. I'm a screamer and a yeller, although 95% of it is positive. You're not going to hear me beating my kids up when they screw up or make a mistake. Right.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Right.
And it really became one of my strengths as a coach. Mm-hmm. My baseball team in 2014, we lost in the state championships to Brookfield Central. We had, and conference championships in baseball in the North Shore Conference were really, really hard to come by. And our last game of the regular season, we lost to Grafton on a game-ending hit. It was one of those things where anything that could go wrong went wrong in that inning, right? Yeah. And my kids were devastated, and we got through the handshake line, and they sit down, and I looked at them, and I was still fired up, and I'm like, okay, why'd we lose this game? And it was a rhetorical question. And they looked, I got their attention. They looked up at me and I said, did we lose this game because you guys weren't trying, because you weren't putting in your best effort? Is there anybody on this team that, and my team captain looked up at me and he was like, is he daring me here? And he's like, no, and I said, you're right. We lost this game because we caught some really tough breaks. Everybody did their absolute best. All right. Yeah. It hurts. We're going to recover from it. We're going to go home and we're going to get better. I go, I wouldn't be any prouder of you if we'd won. You carried yourself. And it was a huge moment for them because they were like, yeah, Coach is not judging us because we lost, right?
Right. Correct.
Coach is proud of us because we put the effort in. And then we ended up beating a bunch of teams to get to the state championship. And I had a really good team, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any great pitchers. We didn't have this kid that could go lights out. And that was that karma of that team I talk about. They just did things right, and they just busted their butts and ended up playing for a state championship.
Sure. Yeah.
And so those things, I remember that because I went home that day and I'm like, all right, after the referee incident, I'm like, I screwed up. And after that day, I'm like, I handled that the right way with my kids. Right.
Yep.
And so as I've gotten older, I'm never going to get mad at a kid for losing. And everybody says that, but is that what they actually do? Is that what they live?
I totally agree. Yeah.
And I can't get mad at a kid who's putting in 100% effort and got beat. Like there's things we can do better, hopefully, in terms of on the mat.
Yep. For sure.
And so, that my career in baseball, as I told you before, it was way more successful from a win-loss perspective than my coaching career in wrestling.
Okay.
I won. My teams won 500 and some games. We played in 6 state tournaments, and I was able to enjoy success. In wrestling, we haven't always had that success as a team. But I remember a kid asking me one day in one of my classrooms, "Well, Mr. Millard, if you could only coach one thing, would it be baseball or wrestling?" And I think the kids expected me to say baseball because that's where my success had lied. And I said, if I could only coach one sport, it would be wrestling.
Sure.
And she was a swimmer, the student who asked me, and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, in baseball, I have to cut kids. First of all, I have to tell some kid who's played baseball their whole lives that they might not get to play anymore."
Yeah.
Right? In wrestling's a no-cut sport. And at the time that I had that conversation, wrestling. The thing about wrestling is there's not as much subjectivity as there is in baseball, right? Like I'm determining who's playing, and I'm trying to be objective, but I'm not necessarily going to be right. I may be wrong.
Sure.
In wrestling, if you go out and earn that spot,
that's yours.
You get to be on it. And that was one of the reasons. And then historically, I've had some kids in my program that were at-risk kids.
Sure.
And in education, we say at risk, at risk of maybe not graduating. Maybe they've got family issues. Maybe they hate school. Maybe, maybe they've got a learning disability that they struggle with. And the sport of wrestling, you get out of it what you put in, right?
Correct.
The harder you work, the better you're going to get. And they're not all kids are going to win state titles, but a kid who maybe wrestles for a conference. And that's one of the things we always talk about. Charlie's expectation is I want to wrestle at the state tournament again this year for a title. But when we get to a conference championships, I make sure that he takes a moment if he wins a conference title to appreciate it. Sure. Because some other kid, that may be the biggest match they ever wrestle in. Right?
Ever. Correct.
For a conference championship. And so we're never gonna denigrate what they're trying to accomplish. We're never gonna look, well, that's not my goal. Well, I'm glad that's not your goal because you're in a different place. But that kid needs to be able to celebrate that. I remember talking to Keegan O'Toole. It was about 3 weeks before he was going to win his 4th state championship. And he was being Keegan O'Toole coaching youth kids on a Sunday, right? Because he's just this great guy. And we were having a talk and I said, "Are you still having fun?" Because you're going for your 4th title. I didn't say that part of it, but kids feel that pressure to win that
for sure.
And and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "I'm still having fun. It's a little different." And I just said to him, I said, "I want you to know that I'm going to be there. I'm going to be one of the 15,000 people that stands up and applauds you when you win your 4th state title." And I said, "I want you to do one thing for me, Keegan. Take a second and enjoy it."
Yeah. Take it in.
Because he was expected to win it, right? He was expected to win it. Yeah. And so one of my strengths is reminding kids to enjoy the moments as you go through and when, enjoy that conference championship, and then enjoy that regional title. And then if you get that section, and and Charlie's in a place where we all know there would be disappointment if he's not wrestling for another state championship in his mind.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean when we get to conference, if he gets the opportunity to win another conference championship, that his mom and I are going to, we're not going to walk away from that. We're going to say, hey, you're a conference champion today.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Well, and that was the thing with like Liam too. Like it was the same thing. We walked up to him, we're like, hey, this is awesome. He's like, next thing. I was like, you still need to like remember this though. Like you still got to take it in. And as athletes, it's hard for those guys, I think, in the moment, because they're like, they got that train. There's like, nope, we just got to go to the next. Still got more left to do, kind of thing. So yes, I think it's important and great that you bring that aspect.
I've seen a lot of growth in Liam because he was telling everybody, I want to be a state champion as a freshman. Right. And I mean, Jesus, he placed 5th at a 160 as a freshman in the state championships, which is incredible. Right. Some kids that they put too much pressure on themselves. I don't know Liam well enough to know if he was putting undue pressure on himself.
Could have been.
Yes, Monty, you would have gotten an easy A with me. If there was one thing I had, it was a reputation as being an easy teacher. Too easy, soft in my old age.
I popped that one up there for sure. Yeah.
Monty and I have had a couple conversations about expectations too. Right? Monty has a son who's an outstanding wrestler.
He sure does. Zahn.
Last year, Zahn had, at the youth state tournament, had a little hiccup. And I was talking Monty off the edge of the cliff for a little bit, right?
I can only
with
imagine.
The perspective of someone, he'll probably deny it now. We'll see.
Of course.
But he was a dad who, he loves his kids so much.
Correct.
Right. He wants them to have the success. And Zahn's a kid who works like crazy to be good.
We've seen him for years.
And we become consumed by that. I'm consumed by wanting success for Charlie. I am. I try to do a good job of not expressing that in front of him sometimes because I don't want that to impact him. But Monty and I had some talk. We were messaging each other on Facebook, and I'm like, dude, you got to calm down and enjoy the ride. Because the coach in me watched Zahn's matches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Monty, he did great stuff. Like he got caught here, and gave up some points, but he's the one that's got the leg attacks going and he's doing great stuff, And next thing we're looking, the last time I checked, Zahn Beal was doing okay, winning national titles. Right. Like, so, and we're all like that. When you love your kid as much as we do, as we all do, it's hard not to get consumed by that. And sometimes when we love them so much that we try too hard, right? Where we just need to get out of the way.
Well, and the failure kind of feels like your own, right? Like you feel like you did something. Like what do I need to fix?
And
to make this better for them.
That's a huge problem with us as parents. Like I always say, I'm not defined by, but we still feel it. I'm not defined by whether Charlie's a great wrestler or not.
Right.
And Lisa always helped me with that. Right. Because she would go to meets with us and, she wanted him to win because he was happier when he won, but she didn't care. Right. And when I was coaching on the flip side, Charlie didn't care if we won. He just wanted to get on the bus with the team and go for ice cream after.
That's it.
But we look in the mirror and this is something, if parents get one thing from listening to you and I talk tonight, you are not defined by your child's wins and losses.
Correct.
You are defined by the kind of person your child is. Right. And the input that you have, the support that you give them. Right. If you're encouraging growth in your kid, then that's what should define you. Right. And we talk all the time, as parents who coach, and my coaches are like, oh, it must be great to be his coach. And I'm really honest. Like I in title am Charlie's head coach. I'm not Charlie's coach. All right. Max Askren is Charlie's coach. Max has been Charlie's coach for a long time. And when Charlie was getting to where he was, and I was getting close to retirement, I wanted to find, and the sport is so different from when I was wrestling. It's passed me by in so many ways.
Yep.
I found Ryder Sigler, who, was a lot younger, wrestled at Cedarburg, wrestled at Whitewater, works with Max.
Yeah.
A guy who could help Charlie. Ryder is Charlie's coach in the practice room, right? And when we get to matches, and I defer to Ryder on things. So the one thing I've done a great job of now as a coach who's also a dad is I haven't gotten in my own way. I haven't screwed my relationship up with my kid. I've seen a lot of dads who I think are over the top, and I observe and I'm like, I'm not going to be that dad. I am not going to make my kid hate me.
I had to go through that as well. I mean, because I played high level athletics when I was younger. I was in soccer, so I have a high tolerance to I guess others around me as far as competing and things like that. I can definitely bring them along. Like I don't get bogged down by bringing guys along, but like as a parent, it's hard for me to bring myself down and bring myself along at the beginning, because when he was young, that's all he had was me coaching. We went into the room and, we had our coaching in there, but those guys can't go to the tournaments. So from 5 years to now, and I pulled the cord probably, I would say 2 years ago when I was like, Josh is yours. Coach Machek, he's yours. And I'm comfortable with that because.
Well, and you ended up with two pretty good coaches there too, right? Oh
man, I couldn't even,
I had not met Coach Machek until last year at the coaches convention. And I sat with him, and we actually sat and had a beer before the before the Hall of Fame inductions.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever sat with him.
Really?
And chatted. And what an amazing coach. Oh my gosh.
Great guy. Very great guy.
Knows so much and has a similar belief system to what I have in terms of growth in kids, we talk about that growth mindset all the time. So that was, Brad, that was a really good decision on your part, because there's only so much we can do for our kids, even though we love them so much and we think that we can.
Yeah. And your kids, but deep down, I mean, what the drive that they have, and like we've talked about a couple times now, like sports just aren't the same. The pressure is a little different in kids. So you got social media, you got all this other stuff, you got people making comments about, who's ducking who, because it really boils down to is,
I got, especially, Charlie's at Max's Academy, right?
Yeah.
And they've had a special group of kids, right? You had Braden Scholes and Ethan Riddle last year with them. And then you've got the two Mirasolas, and you've got Charlie, and you got Silas Dale, and you got Wyatt Duchesneau, right? In the class of 24, right? And Connor O'Donnell, right?
Yep.
And
Connor, yep.
I just gave you 8 names of D1 guys, right?
Yep.
And then below them, you've got behind them other kids that, like Colin McDowell. And the list goes on and on. And they were just in a really, really special place. Like, there's nothing I can do to help here other than be supportive.
That's it.
And listen.
Just had that conversation with Josh. Yep.
When I look back, I'm going to go, all right, my greatest strength is I recognize that I didn't screw it up with Charlie. And I know I didn't. Yeah. You can see I got a little cut on my lip right here.
Were you wrestling?
He picks on me all the time at home.
Oh, man. Charlie, stop it. Stop it, Charlie.
But I knew last year, and it's just one of those little moments, right? I knew I hadn't screwed things up because he was getting ready for the championship match.
Yeah.
And I just let him do his thing. He knows how he wants to prepare, and he went downstairs, and I always say, you text me when you want me to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd been gone 5 minutes, and he texted me and said, you want to come down, Dad?
That's awesome.
Which was his way of saying, Dad, I want you to come down with me.
Yep.
And I got down, and he just came over and gave me a hug. And then we did not say another word. And that was at like 1:20 something.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Same to you, buddy. And I went down, he gave me a hug, and I just got out of his way and let him warm up. But he wanted me there, which tells me I didn't screw it up. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, exactly.
And
Well, and so you developed that over time though too. Like you had the practice guys, to kind of, they weren't your kids, but you were able to see how an athlete is able to develop. And like you said, you develop relationships, and obviously as your son, it's a different relationship, but you knew the space. You knew, okay, he does better when this happens. So you put things together. I mean, obviously you're not a dumb guy, Ernie. So I mean, you're able to put things together. So
I'm smart enough to, and this has been enough, I'm smart enough to surround myself with good people.
Yep.
Like I remember when I was probably 26 or 27, and my dad and I, like I said, didn't see eye to eye. It's one of those conversations you never forget. And my buddies were over. We were shooting hoops in the driveway and having a great time, and my parents were grilling out a little bit. And my dad came up and put his arm around me and he said, "Ernie, you can really judge people by who they surround themselves with." And what he said to me was, he goes, "You keep great company," he said to me. So I've been really good at picking really good friends. The coaching thing, like I said, I haven't done a lot of coaching with Charlie in terms of what he's doing on the mat. The area that Lisa and I do a lot of coaching with him on is being the kind of person we want him to be, and how he should treat other people. And I do pay really close attention to social media stuff. And
Leo's barely on it.
And Lisa's like we have Life 360 where we know where each other are. Right. And
same here.
I remember one day Charlie's like, Dad, Mom's stalking me on Life 360.
Charge your phone.
And I said, yes, she is. And get used to it. Right.
That's awesome. That's great.
Because
we're not alone in that.
No, God, no. I mean, she stalks me too. I tell him all the time, like, and we joke around about it, but the reality is, when kids are young, I mean, not necessarily young kids, but when we get older, like, you say something on social media and it's not going away. You don't get to take it back.
You don't. That's for sure.
And so we've worked really, really hard to encourage him when he's posting or when he's doing things to really think about what he does before. And then once we got into the recruiting process, after his sophomore year, and the phone started, and I knew some of the schools that were going to recruit him because they were calling for transcripts, and I taught at Homestead. Right. And
gotcha.
And so the guidance counselor would go, "This school just asked for transcripts, Ernie. Why are they asking for transcripts?" This was early on. And I said, well, they're asking because they're showing some interest in him. And it was when we got through the process, and he had decided on Minnesota, which is every day. I told the coaches today, I texted him, I said, if you're bored and you want to listen to the podcast, I'm coming on tonight. But I said I was going to give him a shout out. He ended up picking the University of Minnesota with Coach Agam and Coach Becker and Coach Sanders and Coach Brandevold, because of the kind of people that they are. But I found out after from one of the dads who's involved with the RTC out there that he's like, just so you know, we vet you guys. And he goes, we don't just vet kids, we vet their parents. Right.
I learned about that. Yeah.
He's like, they're going to go on social media and they're going to see what you have to say.
Yeah.
And they're going to go on social media and they're going to check and see what your kid has to say. And we all know there are stories of kids losing scholarships.
Correct.
For stuff that they said on social media. Right.
Yes, that is correct.
And so that aspect of Charlie's life, I've been really involved with in terms of, hey, bud, make sure you're treating this person right. And, and Max has really pushed Charlie to in the leadership area. Right now, he's having a lot of success. Now you want to share your success with other kids. He does this little pay it forward with lessons when they're getting to a certain point. Right. Where, when Charlie was in the 8th grade, Tyler Schiesel of Germantown would give Charlie private lessons. And because Max was getting to the point where he couldn't give them to everybody. Right. And so he was building this I'm going to teach you and you're going to teach. And so that really impacted Charlie and helped him in his growth. And then we got to the point where he was old enough, and Max is like, all right, it's your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're going to start helping.
Yep.
You're going to start teaching.
Yep.
And so that's the part of Charlie that I'm proud of, and I'm biased because he's my kid, but I think he's a good person. He treats other people well.
Charlie's a good kid.
Well, thanks.
A lot of times that I ask athletes this, but I don't get to ask a parent, and you're a coach as well. But what was that process like for you on your side, as far as the colleges contacting and the whole recruiting process? What were you thinking as you're kind of going through it?
It was overwhelming, first of all. I undersell my kids sometimes. Sometimes we do that. I look at Charlie and I still see the little kid with the buck teeth and the Mechlin Mustang singlet who, was losing at the beginner tournament. We began to realize that he was going to be a kid that was highly recruited. Max knew it by going into his freshman year. I remember he said to me, I every once in a while have back spasms, and I had back spasms the Friday before, and I was out working in the garden. And Lisa's like, Max, would you come over and get my idiot husband out of the garden? And so Max came over and he's like, you got 40 minutes and then we're going in the house. Right. And so we went in the house and we're having a beer and I was laying on the floor stretching my back. And I just remember we were talking about lots of things. And with us, it's always going back to wrestling, but just out of the blue, he said, Ernie, your kid's going to be a freak someday. And I was like, and I just looked at him and said, okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. And, then he had a great freshman year in place at state. And then when he beat Angelo Ferrari, that's when I began to realize, like, I went on track wrestling because I wanted to rewatch the match. Right? And he got 4,000 hits in one night on his track account. Like, I'm like, okay, because people wanted to know who this kid is, right?
Yep. What the hell is going on here?
And then when he wrestled Mitchell so well, all of a sudden a lot of schools were asking for transcripts. So I was excited. I still had no concept until June 15th of what was going to happen. And at 12:01, he was getting in the morning, he was getting texts.
Wow.
He got texts from
awesome.
Missouri, Minnesota, and Oregon State. Right. And then at 5:45, I think it was, or maybe it was 6:45, Coach Reeder called him. And for, that day, I'm like, this is fun. This is really cool. My kid's got all these calls.
Yeah.
For about 2 hours. And then I was like, I started thinking about it and I go, so he only gets to tell one of these schools yes, which means he's got to tell all these other schools no.
Yeah. What do you do?
So I was crazy excited, and then I was exhausted. And by the time we got to the fall and he had narrowed it down, Lisa and I were feeling a lot of stress for him because the programs are doing what they want to do. First of all, it's amazing. Big 10 schools and Pac-12 schools,
right?
And Big 12 schools want my kid, right?
Yeah,
and that was overwhelming. But then, and they're doing what they're calling, and they're driving in, and when he wrestled on the Big Cheese, Coach Pendleton flew out from Oregon State, drove to McGuanago to spend time with them,
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then flew out. And I'm like, Charlie might have to call Coach Pendleton, who just spent, and I said to him before he came out, I'm like, if you're not really excited about Oregon State, then you owe it to Coach Pendleton not to waste his time and money. Right.
Right. I agree.
Coach Pendleton's one of the great minds in college wrestling right now.
I agree.
For sure.
I agree.
I just realized he's going to have to call these guys and say no. And part of that process, was if that's where you don't want to go, then you need to be upfront with the coaches. And that's really hard, not practicing avoidant behavior like that. You're 16 and you're telling these guys, we're not going to come here. So it was stressful. And then last year, we're just about 2 weeks away, I think, or no, a week and a half. I went up to the coaches convention and I came home Saturday morning and and Lisa and Charlie and I went in and met with Max to talk about college stuff after practice.
Yeah, for sure.
We wanted to hear what he had to say. I think he wanted to hear what he had to say. And Charlie had kind of narrowed it down to that at that point in time, to Oregon State and Minnesota. UNI was still in the mix. He had called Coach Smith the week before and said, I'm not going to come to Missouri, and which Coach Smith is, oh my God, Coach Smith and Kendrick Maple and Tyrell Todd. Oh my gosh, just amazing people. And I remember when he came down and told us, and I was a little surprised because, he had a relationship with Keegan and but then I got home Saturday. We came home, and Lisa was going out to dinner with her friends, and she left at like 4:30. And Charlie came downstairs and said, "Dad, I know where I want to go to school."
Oh boy!
And I said, "Okay." And I honestly didn't know. And I said, "All right, bud, what do you want? Where do you want to go?" And he said, "I want to go to the University of Minnesota."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay. Have you told Oregon State yet?" "No, I haven't talked to." I haven't talked to Oregon State, and I haven't talked to Coach Schwab at UNI yet. And I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" I said, "You need to tell them." And he called Corey Crooks, who's one of the assistants at Oregon State, who was recruiting Charlie most heavily, who is just an incredible guy.
Yeah.
And he called Corey and said, I've made my decision, and it's not Oregon State. And Corey was amazing, right? And so was Coach Smith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so was Coach Schwab.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came back downstairs after talking to Corey, and I said, when do you want to get in touch with Minnesota? He's like, "I want to call him tonight, Dad." And so I texted the staff and said, are you guys available? Charlie would like to talk to you tonight.
Yeah.
And they said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I made a Zoom call.
Nice.
And I texted Lisa and said, "Charlie is made his decision. He wants to go to Minnesota. He wants to talk to the coaches, and they want to talk at 7 p.m. And she said, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to be home till 7:30. My son is not calling the university he's going to attend until I get home." So I texted him and said, "Can we do it at 7:30?
Yeah.
And Agam said yes. And then we had this great conversation. And Brandon, I remember he said, "Well, usually when we get a text saying Charlie would like to talk to you guys about something, and it's the group, it's a good sign." So we had a great 25-minute conversation with the staff, and we're so excited. And then the next day he had an appointment to talk with Coach Schwab on the phone. And
Doug's a good guy.
And I know I'm saying great things about all these coaches because I really feel that way. There's some just amazing, no decision that he made was going to be wrong, which Lisa and I took a lot of solace in. And Coach Schwab said to Charlie, "Charlie, the only thing I regret is I'm not going to get to spend time with you." He goes, "You're going to do great at the University of Minnesota." And Charlie's really tight with Parker Keckheisen. And Schwab being the kind of guy he is, he called Parker, and Parker texted Charlie 10 minutes later and said, "You're going to be great at the University of Minnesota. I'm rooting for you."
That's awesome. That's great. Well, and so you have,
I'll tell you what, Mr. Hockey, we are so excited that we get to be teammates with Coy Hockey at the University of Minnesota. So Coy committed right after the Freestyle State Championships this year.
Yeah.
And I was chatting with Byron there.
Yeah. I love Byron. Byron, you're a good dude.
Byron's I texted him right after Coy had committed. I was so once you become part of a program, right? And we have never had buyer's remorse about going to Minnesota. Every day we're happier about the decision, which tells us we made the right one.
Yeah.
But when Coy committed, Charlie's a great wrestler, but to get a Coy Hockey, who's a world champ,
right?
And who's done all these amazing things as a teammate, and also the kind of kid and person that Coy Hockey is. I texted Byron. I'm like, I am so happy right now.
That's awesome.
I am so happy. I was calling Lisa. I'm like, Coy's going to Minnesota, honey, and arms were flying up. And
it's gonna be Wisconsin High School University pretty soon. I mean, we're gonna have Charlie there.
They've done a great job. Of recruiting.
Yeah.
Trevor's a Wisconsin guy. He's a River Falls guy, but he's a 2-time All-American at the University of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, afterwards I asked Charlie, I said, what was it ultimately? As great as all these schools are, what was it?
Yeah.
That caused you to want to go to Minnesota the most? And he said their room is the way that their room operates reminds me a lot of Max's room.
Okay.
And he spent a lot of time talking with Trevor. He's an outstanding recruiter, and he's just such a real person. And Luke is so real too. And he goes, and people don't understand how close Charlie is with Max. Like, I've tried to impress that tonight on it, but they're really, really tight. Like, he babysits for them. They spend a lot of time together. And he said, they just remind me most of Max, Dad. That's what he said to me.
I got Liam went to that camp that Crass had with the big guys camp with.
Yeah, Jordy Crass is amazing too. By the way,
he's an awesome guy. He's another firecracker, by the way.
Yeah,
that guy is just ready to go off at any minute. But with the guys that he had there, Liam was able to work a little bit more. There's a lot of smaller guys, and Liam was able to kind of work with those guys one-on-one, and he came back from that. And he said, his work, that's the biggest thing I think right now about the sport and just the things that these kids go through. They recognize things and they see things and they surprise you. And the things that they see. Liam came back and said, they didn't ask about my wins or losses. They asked about what I wanted to accomplish. It wasn't about who I beat, what I beat, when I beat. They asked me, what was I looking to accomplish? And he goes, nobody besides my coaches and those guys, nobody asked me that. Everybody else looks at who I beat and who I lost to.
Yeah. And they, like, when, by the time we were at Fargo, Charlie's sophomore year, then college coaches, they're all over the place at Fargo, right? Yep. I remember asking, and lots of them talk about it, like if Charlie has a bad tournament, I wonder if they're not going to be interested in him anymore, right? And but the interesting thing is their version of a bad tournament is not what ours is as a parent, right?
Correct.
I'm learning that tournament is they didn't win the national title, or they didn't make it through the blood round. They're watching to see how they react after a loss.
Yep.
That's the thing they're watching most. Yep. Like Charlie got just absolutely hammered by Ty Whalen in the quarterfinals, who's an outstanding wrestler, is at Princeton, and he got teched by him. And after the recruiting process was over, I was talking to Trevor and Brandon about it, and or maybe it was during the. I think I was talking to Brandon about it, and he said he was watching Charlie after he lost, because I'm not kidding you, 20 minutes after he lost to Ty Whalen and you're devastated, you're in a blood round now, and if you don't win, you're going home. Right. So 1 minute you're thinking about, I want to win a national title. And the next minute you're thinking about, oh my God, I'm not even going to be on the podium. And he said, I watched Charlie really closely. You could tell he was really disappointed. Max, and this goes back to Max. Max is like, get it together. You're going to be wrestling, and he's wrestling Cutter Sheets, who won 14 matches as a redshirt at Oklahoma State last year. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a graduating senior.
Right.
And he had to beat Cutter Sheets to get on the podium.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And Brandon said that was a really important moment, watching Charlie get himself together to go prepare for that match.
Yeah, that'll work on you even in a high school match. With young kids, that'll work on a kid as far as knowing, oh well, I just fell down this ladder or this rung. Now I got to climb back up this just to do something else. I mean, body language is everything. You see them after the match, and if they're just like this and kind of down the whole time, you may know that it's over with. But at the same time, though, too, now like the experience Charlie's gained, you work past that and you get past it. You know that the goal is completely different from what they're actually looking at in high school. And I'm just starting to learn that as well, talking to some of the guys that we talk to when we go to tournaments, because grades matter, things like that. But when it comes to the competition piece, they want someone that is going to persevere through the things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're always going to be, they want a contender, number one, and they want someone who's going to be stable if it doesn't go their way.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And Charlie shows that. Charlie shows that all the way through. obviously it's been a while since we've actually seen him lose and have to deal with
I've
that
seen,
kind of
I've
stuff.
seen him lose. So
for sure.
You know, as a dad who watches Charlie, and Max is working on transforming these kids into college wrestlers, right? Like,
right.
I remember
and doing
last year, he was like, "Oh, Charlie's hand fighting is really good now." And then a month later, he's like, "Well, we've got to work on his hand fighting." And I said, "What are you talking about? You told me his hand fighting was good." And he goes, "Yeah, his hand fighting was really good for a high school kid. Now we're going to learn to hand fight so that he can be successful at the college level." And, Charlie is a kid who like Max always says, man, it's like a bull charging at a red flag. He's just going to keep shooting and shooting. Sometimes Max wants him to slow down. Yeah. So now, we're at Fargo and all of a sudden he's down, 7-3 in the quarterfinals. And I'm like, and then and one of the things Charlie has is a motor. Everybody who follows Charlie knows that, like, in the third period, he's going to keep coming at you. Right. And he ended up winning that match. And I remember saying to Max, I'm like, I appreciate all that you're doing. It's really hard on me, this maturation process. Couldn't we get a couple takedowns a little bit earlier?
Yeah. Can we do this, please? Because it's killing me.
And of course, Max is like, I don't care what you want. It's not about you. It's about getting Charlie. And I'm like, thanks. I really appreciate that. Right. Like,
so when you, as Charlie now is growing in and he's growing into his senior position here, obviously with the season coming up and with the team coming up, what's the outlook and what's the goal? Not just Charlie, but you got a team, right? I mean, you got a strong team.
Absolutely.
So,
and
what is the outlook?
I've probably talked too long tonight, but
no.
Charlie's one of 3 state champions in the history of Homestead High School.
Okay.
And his goal is to be a 2-time state champ in high school. And he's actually really excited about the season. He's excited about being at Minnesota, but he's excited about the season. Yeah. And so Max and I have talked to him and I said, Charlie, you're going to go down in history as one of Homestead's greatest wrestlers.
Yep.
I want you to go down in history as being one of Homestead's greatest wrestlers on Homestead's greatest team. And so
plausible.
that's the goal is for us to be the best team Homestead's ever had. And I think we're in a really good place with that. First of all, we've got, I drive 8 minutes when he was little to take him to Askren Wrestling Academy. Right. We have this in our backyard.
I killed for that.
Where the Dailies are driving 55 minutes each way to get Silas down there, who's one of Charlie's best friends. And and so it's in our backyard, and it took a long time in this community to convince kids, wrestling's not that sport that everybody's going to go, oh, I want to be a wrestler. Right?
Yeah.
And it was really hard, but we have like 7 or 8 or even 9 kids in that room now. And I could tell, my trainer said to me, because we did body fat testing.
Yep.
You can start doing it on the 16th. And so a bunch of my kids who've been wrestling, they went in and tested, and Kyle's like, you guys are going to be way better this year. And I said, how do you know? And he goes, because these kids are way more toned. They're way more fit than they were a year ago. These kids, awesome. He goes, I can tell you that these kids have put time in.
That's right? Good. Sweet.
I mean, for a long time, our goal was to get our numbers up, and now we're at 30 plus kids, and
good.
And we're in a different sectional this year. We're not going to see Arrowhead, that perennial really good team this year in our sectional. We got moved for the first time. We're not going to, like, when Charlie was a freshman, we were in that super sectional with Kakana.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a meat grinder, and we're in a sectional where we're one of the favorites, to get out of our regional to that team sectional dual meet.
I know Liam's taking note of Guy. Guy
is. It's funny, we were just talking about him today. I think he's the most improved kid on our team, Guy Fraley.
Because I don't know your entire team, but I can say that for sure, because Liam has been practicing with him. He's like, man, he's getting good.
Yeah, and Guy's a young wrestler. He wasn't a guy who was wrestling in club his whole life. It didn't start until 8th, 9th grade. So he's got a really steep learning curve. So, and he's, last year he was at 145. This year he's going to be at 175. and there will be times where we need him at 190.
Holy
Shimmy
cow.
Siegel and George Jones and the two Stammer boys. And the list goes on of kids that have put the time in.
Yep,
and we're going to be able to fill our lineup. We've got kids who have to get better if we're going to be competitive in regionals and get to that team sectional. And you look across at the other side, and the teams that have had traditional success are Oak Creek and Franklin from that regional. And if we want to be competitive with those two teams, and we get to host the sectional dual meet this year, which I'm crazy excited about. The team sectional, that would be I've already gotten to live too many dreams come true. It's probably not fair to ask, but getting to spend, my last year as head coach, maybe competing for a trip to the team state tournament would be pretty cool.
Be pretty sweet. I agree. Yeah. Well, and so the progress that you guys have made, you're going to have a stellar year. It's going to be a great way to cap off coaching, things like that. What are some of your plans? What do you talk about Door County, plan on traveling a little bit now?
Oh, for sure. I retired from teaching in June, actually. Yeah. I had shared that my dad's really struggling with Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And I retired from teaching a year early. We had some young teachers in our department who are awesome.
Yeah.
And we're going through some financial strains. And so there were multiple reasons, but wanting to be able to help my mom out at home, I stepped down. I retired from teaching. And of course, by the time we got to September, I had 2 part-time jobs, and I work with Ozaki Youth Apprenticeship in the morning, finding kids good fits for potential jobs they want to do someday. And then I do hall monitor stuff at my old high school, and I go kind of fill an assistant athletic director role, attending sporting events. So I've stayed super busy. It affords me the opportunity, like Lisa and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary in Door County over the weekend. Yeah. My schedule's flexible enough. I said, Friday, I'm not going to be at work. I got my couple things done with Ozaki Youth Apprenticeship and allowed us to go up. As a native Oregonian, we own a little house out in Oregon on the coast. And so we'll get out there a little bit more often. And then this kid, Ernie Millard, who's going to be at the University of Minnesota, we're hoping that he's, he'll probably redshirt next year, but he still gets to compete at some tournaments. We want the flexibility to get to go watch him.
I want to talk to you about that. So knowing the weight class he's in, I mean, it's not an easy weight class. He's either 157, 165, wherever it's going to wind up being.
Yeah.
With that weight class, what were your thoughts on the process of going through that? Of does he redshirt? Doesn't he redshirt? Do the coaches make that call? Is that them saying, or are they talking to you?
The coaches make that call.
Okay.
100%. And the reality is, I talked to Alex Deringer about it, who I've gotten to know really well.
Yeah.
Who was 3-time national champion. He redshirted at Oklahoma State.
Sure.
And
for sure.
And he, his worst finish at the NCAA tournament was 3rd.
Yeah.
Right. And yet he redshirted. Keegan O'Toole redshirted. Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Only makes sense.
Parker Keckheisen redshirted. So the reality is he's probably going to redshirt.
You got to grow.
The only way that he wouldn't redshirt is if I think they're in a place where Minnesota, and I think the kids that they have coming in are I'm putting them in a place to move back up into that that national picture again,
for sure,
the top 4 picture. If they get to a point where they think Charlie can help them with that next year, then maybe that happens. I think the reality is he's probably going to redshirt. We're trying to condition him in his thought process to be prepared for that, because it's such a grind, right?
Yep. Correct. Well, the opens are tough. A lot of the things he's going to be in are going to be tough.
I will tell you, like I said this before, Max makes the decisions for Charlie. You and I were talking about Super 32s, and I always wanted. We never went out there, and Max said, I just don't think that's a place he needs to go.
Right.
We talked about when Charlie was a sophomore, he could have gone down to 45, and Max said the best thing for him is to stay at 52 and improve. Yep. And Max has never been wrong with Charlie. It's always looking back, and we can look back historically, right? And I don't think that Coach Eggum and Brandevold and Becker and Sanders are going to be wrong either.
I don't think so. Yeah, I just thought it was. I was just curious because I mean, again, a tough weight class. Honestly, I think if Charlie if he made the lineup, I think he would do all right. But there's a lot of growth that happens. I mean, you're walking into now a league where getting in a takedown is great, but are you finishing? They got to be able to. They really got to be able to grow into it.
To put things in perspective, we went out to visit. Because he's technically still a recruit, right? So we could go out for one of their recruiting weekends for the class of 2025. Yep. And he got to practice with the team. Nice. And he was practicing with Michael Blockus, who's an All-American last year, right? And so Charlie was wrestling with another young man and with Devin Wasley. And then Blockus came over. And like 5 seconds in, Charlie hits an ankle pick and gets a takedown, right? And as Blockus is going down to the mat, I'm up above. I see this look on his face like, and I'll tell you what, the next 10 minutes, there were no more takedowns for Charlie Millard. Like,
wasn't so nice.
Michael Blockus is 24 years old and Charlie's 17, right?
Yeah.
My point is that year of growth is huge in a kid. I
agree.
And Charlie's pretty good, right? I mean, he's ranked nationally and he's a state champ. And Michael Blockus, showed him what it means.
There's levels.
If you want to be an All-American caliber athlete, you got a long way to go, kid. Right? I mean,
you got that one. You got that one.
He did get that one. I saw it.
You got that one. That's awesome.
And and Michael Blockus, great young man. Lisa and I ran into him later on in the day at the bookstore buying sweatshirts, and we were just so appreciative that he walked over and chose to wrestle with my kid, at practice. Like, it was so cool.
That is cool. That's very cool. So it's going to be a unique situation. I mean, obviously we're going to wind up going to some duels, over to Minnesota. I know we're going to try and get to some in Wisconsin. We're going to go over to Michigan, see if we can see some. I mean, we like Big Ten wrestling, and there's a lot of things to see. Did Charlie think that he, like, when he chose Minnesota, did he think like, and you made it pretty clear when you talked about it originally, did he maybe think, oh, maybe I should call this coach? Oh, nope, Minnesota was it. You said he was sold right away on the room, and with the things that he's doing and the way that he's growing, did he just maybe balk for a minute and think that he wanted to do something different? No, Minnesota's there.
I mean, and he,
he's a smart kid. I'm not taking away from
the process. I don't think he knew right away.
Yeah.
But as he looked through, I talked to a couple coaches, talked to one of the assistants at South Dakota State.
Okay,
Cam, I'm trying to remember Cam's last name, who was a national champ at Cornell and is just this amazing coach. Yeah. And he and I were talking about the fact that was a school Charlie said, thank you, coach. But and I was really curious about how Charlie handled that process. Yeah. And he said something to me. He said, Charlie knew where he was going, kind of where he wanted to be. And coaches appreciate that fact too, right? Yeah. Like, we're not going to waste time recruiting somebody who doesn't want to come here. But I think he knew he had some ideas of where he wanted to go.
Sure.
What I would do when he was, that spring, when I realized that a school had checked on transcripts, I would, I'd make him a sheet for each school, and it would have the name of the school, where it was located, the conference it was in, how big the city was. Do you want to be in a big city, a little, and then pictures of the coaches, so that when he was talking to them on the phone, he could associate a face to a name.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
And that was honestly all I did. And Lisa and I said, if you want to talk to us about things, we're here. But as the process went through, I had no concerns. Like, I knew that every program he was looking at had great people. So then it was like, okay, what we can't ask for anything else, right? And we're financially in a place, we're really fortunate. He's got a college fund and where
Minnesota does a really good job over there, actually.
Yeah, they're doing a great job, but one school's offering a little bit more than another school, and we're like, don't make your decision based on $3,000 or $4,000, Charlie.
Right.
We don't want you to do that. And that was the one thing in the recruiting process when schools would talk about the financial side of things. He didn't have a clue, and I told him, you don't need to have a clue.
Nope.
That's mom and I's job. And I would listen to what they had to say.
Yeah.
And I'm like, anywhere you want to go that you've determined is going to be great, Charlie. You're going to be in a great place with that.
Awesome.
And that kind of gave that. I didn't want that to be a decision, right? Yeah. Which with some kids, if their family's finances are in a different place, and like I said, he's been really lucky. That's the difference between $5,000 difference a year means a lot, right?
It does. It does. Yeah.
So
sure.
So yeah, we were just in a great place with that. And honestly, we didn't do very much. Like the phone rang a lot, and he'd go upstairs and I'd hear, "Hey coach, hey Coach Smith," or "Hey Coach Pendleton," or cool. "Hey Coach Becker," "Hey Coach Egham," "Hey Coach Schwab," "Hey Coach Roper." Mm-hmm. And you'd hear the conversations, and they were checking, and
that's cool.
And it was really cool. But Lisa and I did not have much to do with that, other than we got really curious at the end. We wanted to know.
Sure. Guidance. You're just guiding. That's all you're doing. Just a little.
It was really hard. It was really hard when we got those last couple of weeks. The other thing I said to him, there was this debate. When should he decide? Some kids decide late. I wanted him to decide before the season started, because I could see that, and he's a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. I could see that it was weighing on him a little bit.
Sure.
And I didn't want him to be carrying that with him. And Ryan Duchateau, who's one of my best friends in the parent coaching rank, and Wyatt's going to Minnesota now with Charlie. He said to me, "Ernie, why would he wait?" He goes, he had a lot of success. He was a 2-time Fargo All-American. He goes, "The only reason you'd wait is if you just don't know.
Yep.
And if you think your stock's going to go up."
Right. Yeah.
And the reality was Charlie's stock wasn't going to go any higher in terms of the recruiting process. Like, who knows? Maybe he goes and wins Fargo and Penn State comes calling or something. You're not going to go much
right
much higher. And I'm like, and I said to him, "Well, is your mind going to change if some of these even bigger than Minnesota right now, which there's only Iowa and
Penn State."
He's like, "No," he's like, "This is where I want to go." I'm like, "Then I hope you make your decision before the season starts. If you know where you want to go." That was the only thing. And I could see the next day. So he committed Saturday night, and then he called Coach Schwab. It was 3:00 in the afternoon. That was when they were talking. And he came downstairs and told me what Coach Schwab had said, who I, just respect so much. Yeah. And you could just see there was kind of a weight lifted off his shoulders. He said, "Hey, Dad, you want to go play horse?" And we went out and played horse.
Nice.
It was a nice afternoon. And so I was really glad that part of it was behind him.
It sounds like obviously the process was easier for him because of the support system he has you guys, and you guys were allowing him to grow, with the mental side of it and taking charge of, like you said, these kids are 16, 17, making a 4-year, 5-year, 6-year decision.
Yeah.
That's tough. It's tough for me at 45, I don't do I want to sign this mortgage paperwork? I don't know if I want to do that, but
right.
But these kids they're under a lot of stress. They're sports. There's all this other stuff going on. So you guys did a great job.
Thanks. My kid made a great decision. I think I said this before. We've had zero buyer's remorse. Like every time we interact with that school, we realize that it's the right fit for him. And that doesn't mean Minnesota's the right fit for everyone.
Right.
I think it's a great place.
Yep.
But there hasn't been 1 second where I'm like, oh man, maybe we should have encouraged him to wait a little longer and pick a different place.
You guys did a great job. Well, and we're excited to watch him this season. Hopefully, we'll start wrapping it up here. You've been on for a while. We got to save some energy for Teague and those guys for when you're on with Teague.
I'm super excited to hang with Teague and Steve, and I'm excited for you, with Vision Quest, because I'm old enough to remember when Vision Quest came out on the screen, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I love where Wisconsin wrestling's going, and things like your podcast, Brad, and what Steve and Teague started doing, and now years ago, what Jacob and RQ are doing. Like, it just brings positive attention to our sport, and our sport's hard, but it's by far the best.
There are so many interesting people within the sport, especially the state, because there's gems that you don't know about. And there are like the stories that you were bringing up. I mean, you don't know about this stuff until you put people out there and just want to talk about the story. You know what I'm saying?
Here's one last piece of history for you.
Hit me with it.
In closing.
Yeah.
I have watched every single 4-time state champ in the history of Wisconsin wrestling, with the exception of Matt Bianchi, because that was the COVID year and they weren't all in the same place.
That's right. That's right. So with that being said, were you talking about all divisions as well?
All divisions.
Oh my God. Wow.
The first 4-time state champion in Wisconsin wrestling history was Matt Hanutke. And I think,
oh my God,
I think it was 1990 that he won his 4th state title.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen every single one of them win their 4th state title since, with the exception of Matty Bianchi, who did it when the 3 state tournaments were separated because of COVID.
Well, I'm glad I could have you on. Like I said, this has been something that I've been thinking about for a while, just because of, again, to Charlie, and everybody wants to see Charlie and Liam, and now they want to know why Liam's ducking Charlie, and I don't care. But with the history that you guys have within the sport, within the state, and the knowledge that you have and the stories that you have, these are the types of shows that I want to have, because then people kind of get an idea of how deep the generations go with the sport, and how people really respect the sport. And I respect a lot of the guys that are in it, referees to coaches to everybody that's involved in it, because it takes a lot. And you're in charge of a team, and you've been a coach for a long time. And there's a lot of things to be said about that. When people keep a coach around like that, you're obviously doing something right. So
well,
you're obviously keeping things in check. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to tell you to tell Charlie good luck this coming weekend. Wrestle hard. We'll be watching. We always love watching him wrestle. It's been fun watching him evolve. The hand fight, what you were talking about, is extremely effective now. So yes, Max is doing a great job with that. So I'm going to change up this banner here, and I'm going to tell everybody thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to Ernie. I know I had a great time listening to him. You guys pay attention and watch for him to be coaching this year, and watch Charlie, because he's going to kill it this year, and he's going to kill it at Minnesota. I guarantee you.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that Crook kid's going to be pretty competitive at 165 this year too, man. I got a feeling we might see him in Madison.
I hope so, and I think we will. But I'm keeping my mouth closed now. I'm gonna let things kind of play out how they need to play out. I'm gonna let him do what he's got to do. We'll do what he's got to do. But with that, I bid you guys adieu. We're gonna talk a little bit on the backside, just like I do with everybody. But thanks everyone, appreciate it.
Peace.
All of our episodes are brought to you by Appleton Tattoo, located at 117 South Appleton Street in Appleton, Wisconsin, right off the main drag on College Avenue. You can't miss them. I've had some work done. I have a Celtic cross that covers my back that was done by Jason. We're not done yet. Jason Winans and crew, the artists that he have there, those guys are the best in the Fox Valley. They are definitely one to go to if it's something that you've just been kind of throwing around. They'll make you feel comfortable. It's a very clean environment, very nice crew, and very willing to get done whatever you need done when you need it done. You can message them on Facebook. I know they're on Facebook. You can give them a call at 920-604-8289 and get in touch with Jason Winans and crew at Appleton Tattoo, located again in Appleton, Wisconsin at 117 South Appleton Street, right in Appleton. Very flexible hours, great crew, clean environment again. I would not send you anywhere else except for these guys. Appleton Tattoo.